The day I buried my wife, it rained so hard I could barely see the preacher's lips moving. I am Frank. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a licensed electrician in Nashville, Tennessee, crawling through attics in July heat and unfinished basements in January cold, coming home every night smelling like copper wire and sawdust. Carol used to say I was the only man she knew who could fix anything in the world except the garbage disposal under our kitchen sink, which I had been promising to replace since 2009. She was right about that. She was right about most things. We buried her on a Tuesday in March at Harpeth Hills Memory Gardens, which is the kind of place that looks peaceful when you're not the one standing in front of a coffin. The sky opened up about 20 minutes into the graveside service and never let up. The funeral director handed me a black umbrella, and I just held it without opening it. I stood in the rain. I let it soak through my good suit, the one Carol picked out for our daughter's wedding 9 years ago. I didn't care. I wanted to feel something other than the nothing that had settled into my chest the moment the hospice nurse pressed 2 fingers to Carol's wrist and then looked at me with that practiced, quiet sorrow. There were maybe 15 people there. Old neighbors, a couple from our church, my buddy Ray from the job, who drove 2 hours from Clarksville without me even asking. My grandchildren, 2 of them, standing close together under their mother-in-law's umbrella like confused little birds. My son was not there. My daughter was not there. I found out later, the way you find things out now, on a screen. My son had posted something on LinkedIn that morning, a photo of himself in a conference room in Dallas, shaking hands across a table, grinning that grin he had been perfecting since he was 16 years old. The caption said something about closing a landmark deal and being grateful for the journey. He used the word synergy, unironically. I read it twice. Then I put my phone in my jacket pocket and listened to the rain hitting the tent canopy above Carol's casket. My daughter had posted a reel on Instagram 2 days before the service. She was at some kind of wellness retreat in Sedona, Arizona. Red rocks in the background. She had a linen tunic on, and her hair was down, and she was talking about releasing what no longer serves you. She tagged 3 sponsors. The reel had 47,000 views by the time Carol was in the ground. They had been told. I had called them both when the hospice nurse confirmed it was a matter of days, not weeks. My son said he was in the middle of a deal that couldn't be postponed. He said Mom would understand. He said he'd come as soon as he could. My daughter said she was so sorry. She was devastated. She just couldn't get out of the retreat contract. She had investors involved. It was complicated. I wouldn't understand the business side of things. She cried on the phone, or made the sounds of crying. I had heard Carol cry enough times over 38 years to know the difference. I drove home alone after the service. I sat at our kitchen table and ate a peanut butter sandwich because it was the only thing I could find energy to make. Carol's reading glasses were still on the counter next to the coffee maker. Her handwriting was still on the whiteboard we kept on the refrigerator, a grocery list she had started in January before things got too hard. Whole milk, lemons, the good bread from the bakery on Charlotte Pike. I stood there, looking at it for a long time. Then I covered it with a dish towel so I could breathe. They came on Thursday morning, 2 days after the funeral. I heard the rental car before I saw it. One of those big black SUVs that cost $400 a day. My son climbed out first, wearing a jacket that probably cost more than my first truck. My daughter got out of the passenger side, sunglasses on despite the gray sky, wheeling a carry-on bag even though they were not planning to stay the night. I noticed that immediately. No overnight bags. They had not come to grieve. They had come to transact. I opened the front door before they could knock. My son hugged me, one of those half hugs, where the other person's body is already pulling back before the embrace starts. He smelled like airport cologne. He said, "Dad, I am so sorry. I am so deeply sorry. There was nothing I could have done. You know how much I loved her." His voice hit every note of sincerity, like a man who had rehearsed sincerity. I said nothing. I stepped aside and let them in. My daughter hugged me longer, which surprised me, until I realized she was crying actual tears this time and saying, "Mom, I can't believe Mom is gone," over and over. I put my hand on her back. She was my little girl once. She used to fall asleep on the couch with her feet in my lap, watching old westerns she was too young to follow. Whatever she had become, she had been that girl first. We sat at the kitchen table. I made coffee. Nobody talked about the funeral until my son cleared his throat and said he was sorry he couldn't be there. He really was. But Mom would have understood. She knew how hard he worked. She was always his biggest supporter. He said it looking at the surface of the table instead of at me. I said, "She asked for you. In the last week. She asked where you were." He looked up. He blinked once. Then he said, "That must have been the medication talking. She knew I had obligations." I let that sit there. My daughter reached across and put her hand on mine. She said, "Daddy, we need to talk about some things. Practical things." She said it the way a doctor delivers news. Soft and preemptive, like the softness is supposed to cushion what comes next. I said, "What kind of things?" My son reached down to the bag at his feet and pulled out a folder. He was always organized. I'll give him that. He set the folder on Carol's kitchen table, on the tablecloth she had bought at a craft fair in Franklin 8 years ago, and he opened it. He said, "Dad, we need to deal with the estate." I looked at the papers. I recognized the header on the top sheet. It was from a probate attorney in Nashville, one I had never contacted. He said Mom didn't have a formal will. I mean, she had one, but it was from 2008, before the grandkids, before a lot of things changed. He paused. Under Tennessee law, when someone dies without a current will, the estate is distributed according to intestate succession. He was saying words he had clearly looked up or been told to say. "There's a process," he continued. "The house, the savings, the life insurance, it all goes through the estate. You'd get your share, obviously. But as the children, we have a legal right to our portion as well." My daughter nodded along. She had switched from grieving daughter to business partner, somewhere between the front door and the kitchen table. I said the house. My son said the house. Yes. He flipped a page in the folder. He said the house was currently valued at around $480,000 based on comps in the area. He said Nashville real estate was still strong. He said, with my fixed retirement income and Social Security, maintaining a property this size wasn't practical. He said the yard alone was a burden. He said the word burden the way someone says it when they've been practicing it. My daughter said, "Daddy, we're thinking about what's best for you. You shouldn't have to worry about property taxes and maintenance at your age. We found some really nice senior living options. Here's one in Brentwood, very clean, lots of activities." She pulled out her phone and showed me pictures. It looked like a hotel where people went to wait. I said, "How long have you been planning this?" My son said, "We've been thinking about the future for a while now. Planning is responsible. Mom always said planning was important." I said, "Your mother's been in that ground for 48 hours. The room got quiet. Outside a car passed. A dog barked somewhere down the street. My son's face changed. The practiced sympathy went away, and something else came through. Something I had been seeing glimpses of for years and choosing not to name. He said, "Dad, this isn't personal. This is financial reality. The estate has to be settled. The sooner we do it cleanly, the better for everyone." I said everyone. He said he and his sister had already talked to a realtor. She could list the house by the end of the month. He said I would walk away with enough to cover the senior living facility for years. He said this was the smart move. I looked at my daughter. She was looking at her phone. I thought about the summer we painted this kitchen. Carol had picked a yellow that I thought was too bright, and I had complained about it the entire weekend, and then she was right, the way she was always right, and that yellow had been the heart of this house for 20 years. I thought about the back porch, the one I built myself over 2 weekends in October of 2003, the one where Carol used to sit in the morning with her coffee before the rest of the world woke up. I said, "I want you to leave." My son looked up from the folder. I said, "This is my home. Carol's name was on this deed, same as mine, for 32 years. You will not come in here 2 days after I put her in the ground and talk to me about comps and realtor listings." I said, "Get out." My son stood up. His voice got tight and careful. He said, "Dad, I understand you're grieving." He said I wasn't thinking clearly. He said I was making an emotional decision that I would regret. He said he was trying to protect me. I said, I have been protecting myself since before you were born. I said, the door is behind you. My daughter looked genuinely hurt, and maybe some of it was real. She said, Daddy, please, we're just trying to help. She said she loved me. She said she loved her mother. I said, if you loved your mother, you would have been standing next to me in the rain on Tuesday. She stood up. My son was already moving toward the door. He said, fine. He said we'd do it the hard way. He said his attorney would be in contact. He said Tennessee probate law was clear, and I should get a lawyer of my own if I wanted to waste money fighting the obvious. They left. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Then I walked into the bedroom, to Carol's side of the dresser, to the second drawer, the one where she kept things she called important. Under a stack of birthday cards and a small book of crossword puzzles she never finished, there was an envelope. She had given me instructions 3 weeks before she died, on a Sunday afternoon while I was sitting beside her on the hospital bed we had rented for the living room, holding her hand while she slept. She woke up and turned her head and looked at me with those eyes that had looked at me across 38 years of mornings, and she said, Frank, there is something in my dresser drawer. She said, do not open it until after. She said, I will know when you need it. I had not understood what she meant. She said that with whatever strength she had left. I nodded. I said, okay. I said I would wait. I took the envelope to the kitchen table. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I sat down in the same chair I had been sitting in when my children tried to take my home, and I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten in Carol's handwriting, 6 pages on her good stationery. The cream-colored paper with the small blue borders she ordered from an online shop every Christmas. And there was a thumb drive, a small green one, the kind you can buy at any drugstore. She had taped it to the inside of the envelope with a strip of masking tape, and written on the masking tape with a marker, start with the letter. I smoothed the first page on the table. Frank, she had written, my love, if you are reading this, it means the worst has happened, and I'm sorry I'm not there to say this to your face. I'm sorry for a lot of things, and I need to explain them to you so you understand what I did and why I did it. I read slowly. She wrote that she had known for a long time, longer than she ever told me, what our children had become. She wrote that she had watched it happen slowly, the way a house settles, so gradually you don't notice until a door won't close right anymore. She wrote that she had loved them and enabled them, and she understood that her love and her enabling were sometimes the same thing, and that this had been her failing as much as their choice. She wrote about the money. Our son had borrowed $70,000 from us over 4 years. Not once, twice, 3 separate times. For investments he described as sure things. For gaps in cash flow during deals that would be huge when they closed. For emergencies that were always someone else's fault. He had paid back $11,000 of it. The rest was gone. Each time Carol had handled it herself, told him she would talk to me, and then absorbed it quietly because she was afraid of what it would do to my relationship with him if I found out. She wrote that she had been wrong to do that. She wrote that her silence had been a kind of lie, and she was sorry for it. Our daughter had taken $44,000 over 5 years. Smaller amounts. A loan for her wellness business that lasted 8 months. Help with rent during the period when her husband left and things were hard. An investment in her content platform that she said would generate passive income and instead generated exactly 1 sponsored post about herbal supplements before going dark. Carol had told her each time that she wouldn't mention it to me, that it was between them, that she believed in her. She wrote that she did not regret believing in her, but she regretted that the belief had never been reciprocated. She wrote that when the doctor sat them down in September and used words like palliative and timeline, she had known what would happen. She wrote that she had seen the calculation behind our son's eyes at that appointment, and she recognized it because she was a mother, and mothers learn to read their children the way other people read weather. She wrote that she was not angry, exactly. She wrote that she was heartbroken, which is different. She wrote that she had done 4 things without telling me, and she needed me to understand why. First, she had consulted an attorney in October. His name was James Alderton, and his office was on West End Avenue, and his number was on the back of the letter. She had done this alone, on a Tuesday when I thought she was at a doctor's appointment, which she was. But she had gone to the attorney's office first. Second, she had transferred the house. Our house had been in both our names for 32 years, but our mortgage had been paid off in 2018, and the deed had been refinanced with a quitclaim into joint tenancy. Under Tennessee law, joint tenancy with right of survivorship means that when one joint tenant dies, the property passes automatically to the surviving tenant outside of probate. She had already confirmed with the attorney that this was in place and properly recorded. The house was not part of the estate. The house was mine. Third, she had updated her life insurance beneficiary designation in November. The policy was through her former employer, a $200,000 term life policy she had been paying into since 1998. She had changed the primary beneficiary to me alone. This also passed outside of probate. It was mine. Fourth, she had opened a custodial account for each of the grandchildren. She had funded each account with $15,000 from the money she had saved from her own retirement account over the last 2 years. The accounts were in the grandchildren's names, with me listed as custodian until each child turned 21. She had designated that the funds could only be used for education expenses. She had done this specifically so that our son and our daughter could not touch it, could not borrow against it, could not manipulate the grandchildren into surrendering it. She wrote that all of this was legal. She wrote that the attorney had confirmed it. She wrote that she had been of sound mind and had the paperwork to prove it, including a letter from her physician certifying her mental competency at the time each document was signed. She wrote that she was sorry she had not told me. She wrote that she was afraid I would try to stop her. Not because I didn't understand what our children were, but because I was a man who still believed in giving people chances. And she loved that about me, but she had run out of chances to give. Then she wrote, "And Frank, there is one more thing, the thumb drive. Please watch it. I know you won't want to. Watch it anyway. You need to see this. Not to be angry. You have a right to be angry. But so that you never doubt yourself. So you never open the door to them again and wonder if you were wrong. I need to know what they said." I put the letter down. I poured a glass of water and drank it standing at the sink, looking out at the backyard, at the fence I had repaired 3 summers ago, at the 2 oak trees we had planted the year we moved in because Carol wanted shade on the back porch by the time she was 50. They were enormous now. She had gotten her shade. I picked up the thumb drive. I do not own a laptop, so I drove to the public library on Charlotte Pike and used one of their computers and put headphones on and plugged in the thumb drive. There were 3 video files. They were dated November, December, and February. 3 separate recordings. I watched the first one. It was taken in our living room. Carol had set her phone on the bookshelf, propped against a framed photo of our wedding. The angle was not perfect, but you could see the couch clearly, and you could hear everything. The date stamp said November 14th. Our son came in and sat on the couch. Carol sat in the armchair. He was wearing a blazer. He had a coffee. He looked relaxed, the way people look when they believe they are in control of a situation. He said, "Mom, we need to talk about the future." He said it gently, the way he would say it to a client. He said he and his sister had been talking. He said they were worried about Dad, about whether I could manage things, about whether the house made sense long term. He said all of this reasonably and warmly. Then he said, "Mom, the house is worth close to $500,000. He said sitting in a house like that with just a retirement income was not smart financial management. Carol said, "Your father is 63. He is not incapacitated." Our son said, "Of course not. But you have to think about what happens when you're gone. Dad isn't going to want to deal with property taxes and maintenance alone." He said he and his sister could manage the asset. He said they had found a community, a nice one, assisted living but independent. Carol would love it. Carol said, "I am the one who is dying. I am not sending your father somewhere." Our son's voice shifted, just slightly. The warmth adjusted itself into something firmer. He said, "Mom, let's be realistic." He said I was probably going to struggle with the grief. He said I had never been the one who handled the finances, which was not true, but he said it anyway. He said the kindest thing was to let him and his sister take over. He said they just needed her to sign a document granting limited power of attorney, just for the financial matters, just to make the transition easier. Carol said, "What document?" He pulled papers from his bag. He slid them across the coffee table. Carol looked at them for a long time. Then she looked up at the camera. Not at him, at the camera. I think she was reminding herself she was recording. I think she was reminding herself to stay calm. She said, "I would like you to leave now." He said, "Mom, I'm trying to help." She said, "I understand that you believe that." She said, "I would like you to leave." He said, "Fine." He gathered the papers. He stood up. He said he would give her time to think about it. He said they could revisit this. He said he loved her, and he just wanted what was best for everyone. He walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. Carol sat in the armchair for a minute without moving. Then she leaned forward and picked up her phone and stopped the recording. I sat at the library computer and breathed carefully. I watched the second video. This one was our daughter. December, 3 months before Carol died. Our daughter sat in the same armchair where Carol usually sat, which told me something about how she had taken over the space the way she took over every room she entered. She had her coffee and her phone on the armrest, and she was talking about the retreat. She was talking about how transformative it had been. She was talking about the importance of processing grief early, proactively, which she had apparently been doing at a spa in Arizona, while her mother was on hospice medication in Tennessee. Then the conversation shifted. Our daughter said, "Mom, have you thought about the life insurance?" Carol said, "What about it?" She said, "We were talking, she and her brother, and they were thinking, since Dad already had his own retirement savings and Social Security, maybe it would make more sense to split the insurance benefit between the kids." She said, "I wouldn't know what to do with $200,000. She said it would just sit in a savings account somewhere. She said she had some investment opportunities that could really grow that money. She said she just needed a beneficiary change form. She had already downloaded one. It would take 5 minutes. Carol said, "Your father is my beneficiary." Our daughter said, "I know, but you could change it. You're still competent. The doctor said so. You can make this decision." She smiled. She put her hand over Carol's hand. She said, "Mom, Dad doesn't need it." She said, "I do." She said, "Think of it as giving us our inheritance now instead of later." She said it was more efficient. Carol said, "Efficient." Our daughter said yes. Carol said she was tired. She said she would think about it. Our daughter said she had the form right here. Carol said, "I said I would think about it." Our daughter sat back. She looked at her phone. She looked back at Carol. She said, "Mama, I love you. I really do. But I need you to think practically." She said our son had certain advantages she didn't have, being in real estate, being positioned to benefit from the house. She said all she had was the insurance. She said it wasn't fair for her to get nothing. Carol said, "I'll let you know." Our daughter stood up. She leaned down and kissed Carol on the cheek. She said, "Okay, but we're running out of time, so sooner is better." She said it kindly. She said it the way you say things you mean, when you've decided the kindness is the cover and not the content. She left. Carol sat for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and stopped the recording. I did not watch the third video right away. I sat at the library computer with the headphones on and looked at the screen. Around me, people were researching things, reading things, doing whatever people do at a public library on a Thursday afternoon. A child was arguing with her mother about something near the picture books. The fluorescent lights hummed. I thought about Carol sitting in our living room, already sick, already tired, pressing record on her phone because she understood what was happening, and she understood I would need evidence. She had not called me. She had not asked me to handle it. She had handled it herself, methodically and quietly, the way she had handled almost everything in our marriage, while I drove to job sites and thought I was the one holding things together. I pressed play on the third video. This one was February, 5 weeks before she died. Our son again. This time there was no pretense of warmth at all. He sat across from Carol, and he said, "Mom, we need to resolve this." He said he had been patient. He said he and his sister were not going to wait indefinitely. He said if Carol didn't sign the power of attorney, they would have no choice but to go to court after she was gone. He said they would contest the estate. He said they would argue I had manipulated her, that I had isolated her from her children, that I had exercised undue influence over her financial decisions. He said they had grounds. Carol said you would do that to your father. He said it wouldn't be personal. It was just law. He said estates got contested all the time. He said probate could take years. He said I would have to hire attorneys. He said it would drain whatever savings Carol had left for me. He said at my age, fighting a legal battle was not something I needed. Carol said, then I suppose you will have to do what you have to do. He said, Mom. She said, I know who you are now. She said it quietly. She said, I think I have known for a while, and I was too afraid to accept it. But I know now. She said his father had given him everything he had, and he had taken it and decided it was not enough, and that was something she would have to live with, or die with, however the timing worked out. He said she was being dramatic. She said, please leave my home. He said, Mom. She said, I will call the police if you don't leave. She said she was not afraid of him, and she was not afraid of what came after, and she was not going to sign anything for him or his sister, ever, and she wanted him gone. He stood up. He straightened his jacket. He said he was sorry it had come to this. He sounded like someone reading from a script about a character who was sorry. He left. Carol sat for a moment. Then she looked at the camera one more time. She said, Frank, I love you. She said, I'm sorry about all of this. She said, he was wrong about you and wrong about us, and I need you to remember that. She said, use these if you need them. She said, you are not defenseless. She reached over and stopped the recording. I drove home from the library and called James Alderton. He answered on the second ring. He said he had been expecting my call. He said Carol had told him I would call soon after she was gone. He said she was one of the most prepared clients he had ever worked with. His voice had a kind of professional warmth that told me he genuinely meant it. I went to his office the next afternoon and sat across from a man who had spent several hours with my wife planning the protection of my future, and he walked me through everything she had done. The house was mine, joint tenancy with right of survivorship, properly filed with the county clerk, no ambiguity. It passed to me automatically at the moment of Carol's death. It was not subject to probate. Our children had no claim on it. The life insurance was mine. Beneficiary designations supersede wills. She had changed it in November, signed, witnessed, submitted to the insurance company, confirmed, received. $200,000, coming directly to me with no estate involvement. He said, your son has sent a letter to our office already. He turned the letter around on his desk so I could read it. It was from our son's attorney in Dallas. It alleged undue influence. It alleged I had manipulated Carol. It alleged diminished capacity at the time of the beneficiary change. I said I have 3 videos. James looked at me over his glasses. I told him about the videos. I told him what was in them. He said, let me see them. I gave him the thumb drive. He watched in silence while I sat across from him. When the 3rd video ended, he sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment and then back at me. He said, Mr. Frank, your wife did everything right. He said, let me write a response. The response went out 2 days later. It included copies of Carol's physician's letter certifying her mental competency at the time of the beneficiary change. It included the notarized documentation of the quitclaim deed with the full joint tenancy language. It included a brief description of the videos and a note that originals were available and that we were prepared to allow the court to review them in detail should the matter proceed to litigation. Our son's attorney withdrew the letter in 3 days. My son called me on a Sunday night. I almost didn't answer. I looked at his name on my phone for a long time. Then I answered. He said, Dad, look, things got out of hand. He said he was grieving. He said he hadn't been thinking clearly. He said he loved me, and he loved his mother, and he was sorry. I said he had sat in Carol's living room in February and threatened to destroy me in court if she didn't sign over power of attorney. I said he had done it while she was on hospice medication. While she was dying, I said I had the video. He was quiet. I said I'm not going to do anything with the videos. I said I'm not going to fight. I said you got what you wanted to get, which was nothing, and I am going to live my life. He started to say something, and I said, I'm going to tell you one thing, and then I'm going to hang up. So listen. I said your mother loved you. Genuinely. Completely. Even at the end. She named you in her letter to me. Said she loved you. Said she was heartbroken about who you had become. She did not call you a bad person. She said you had made choices. She said she hoped someday you would understand what those choices had cost you. He said, Dad. I said, that's what I had to say. I hung up. My daughter called 2 days later. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that ran 4 minutes and covered a lot of ground, including how much pressure she was under, how social media had warped her priorities, how she had been in therapy and was working through things, how she missed me and missed her mother, and how she understood if I needed space, but she hoped someday we could talk. I listened to the message twice. Some of it sounded genuine. Some of it sounded like a sponsored post for reconciliation. I couldn't always tell the difference, and maybe that was the problem. I put the phone down and went out to the back porch. I spent the next several weeks doing the things that needed doing. I went through Carol's clothes slowly, not all at once, a drawer or a section of the closet at a time when I was ready. I kept 3 of her sweaters. I donated the rest to a church thrift store she had liked. I updated the whiteboard on the refrigerator. I took down the dish towel, and I looked at Carol's handwriting one more time. The grocery list with the whole milk and the lemons and the good bread from the bakery on Charlotte Pike. Then I erased it carefully and wrote my own list. I had lunches with Ray from the job. I started going to a grief support group on Wednesday evenings at the church, which I thought I would hate and did not hate, because it turned out there were a lot of people sitting around a folding table in a church basement who understood exactly the particular exhaustion of watching someone you love leave by degrees. I looked into the house question myself, without being told to. The house was too big for one person. The back porch was perfect, but the second floor sat empty. The yard needed more than I could give it. I thought about what Carol had said in her letter about the stairs. She had been right about that too. I did not rush. I waited until I was ready. 6 months after Carol died, I put the house on the market. I chose the realtor myself. The house sold in 11 days for $492,000. I stood in the driveway the morning the moving truck came and looked at the oak trees. They were full with late summer leaves. Carol had gotten her shade and she had gotten it for years, and I was glad about that. I bought a house. Not a condo, not a senior living facility. A house, smaller, 1 floor, 3 bedrooms, on a quiet street in Germantown. 15 minutes from where the grandchildren go to school. It has a covered porch in the front and a small yard I can manage on my own, and a kitchen with east-facing windows that catch the morning light the way Carol always wanted. I put a significant portion of the sale proceeds into the custodial accounts, alongside what Carol had already established. Each grandchild now has enough for a full 4-year college education at a state school, plus some left over, locked in, protected, nothing their parents can touch or borrow or spend on investments that fall through next quarter. When the youngest turns 21, those accounts become theirs. I wrote letters to each of them, 3 letters, sealed and dated, explaining what their grandmother had done and why. And James Alderton is holding them in his office to be delivered when the time is right. My son sends texts occasionally. Short ones. He sent one when he heard I had sold the house. He said he hoped I was okay. I replied that I was. We haven't spoken on the phone since the Sunday call. My daughter actually did go to therapy. She calls once a month now, brief calls, careful calls, the calls of someone who is not sure what they are allowed anymore. She asked me once if I would be willing to have dinner. I said maybe sometime. She said she understood. She didn't push. That was new. I don't know if they will ever fully understand what they did or what they lost. I think my son knows on some level and has chosen not to look at it directly, because looking at it would require him to rearrange things about himself he has built his whole identity around. I think my daughter is genuinely trying to become someone different, and I think she is finding it harder than a wellness retreat would have suggested. I don't take pleasure in any of it. That surprises people when I say it, but it's true. There is no satisfaction in being right about who your children are. There is only the complicated and ongoing grief of it, which sits alongside the other grief, which is Carol, which will never fully leave. What I have instead is the morning. I wake up in my new house on Germantown Street, and I make coffee, and I stand at the east-facing windows, and I watch the light change. I call Ray on Thursdays, and we argue about whether the Titans are going to do anything useful this season. I go to the cemetery on Sundays. I bring white daisies because Carol always said roses were predictable. I sit on the bench they have near her section, and I talk to her the way I have talked to her for 38 years, which is honestly and without performance. I tell her about the grandkids. I tell her about the new kitchen. I told her when the custodial accounts were funded. I told her the letters were written and in James Alderton's safe. I told her that I thought she would have liked the new porch. The wind moves through the cemetery and the trees make their sound, and I can almost hear her saying, "I told you so," about the east-facing windows, because she always knew exactly which rooms catch the light. I am 63 years old. I was a good electrician, and I was a good husband, and I am trying to learn what I am in the third act of a life that turned out to be nothing like I expected. I am a widower. I am a grandfather. I am a man sitting on a bench in a cemetery telling his dead wife about the morning light. That is enough. Some days it is more than enough. Carol made me a fortress and handed me the key in a cream-colored envelope on the dresser. She did it quietly and completely and without asking for recognition, because that was who she was. That was who she had always been, and I had been lucky enough to know her, and sometimes too ordinary to see it clearly until now. I see it now. I see it every morning in the east-facing windows. I see it every Sunday in the daisies. I see it in 3 custodial accounts and 3 sealed letters sitting in a lawyer's office for children who do not yet know what their grandmother saved for them. She loved us all the way through to the end and a little past it. That is the thing I hold on to. That is the thing that keeps the nothing from settling back in. I go home. I make dinner. I water the plants on the front porch. I live,